You are playing a game of Commander, and you're doing great. You're drawing cards, you're answering threats, you're having fun. And then it comes time in the game where you need to put things away. You need to clean it up to show your friends and those at your local game store that you are the master of your own destiny and that you came to win. But how exactly do you do that? How does your deck, or more importantly, how does your favorite color win in Magic the Gathering? Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're returning, and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I am your host and your friendly blue mage Azarain. And if you like the style of content that I'm putting out, make sure to like and subscribe and watch my other videos if you'd like. But if you would like to see more gameplay related stuff, be sure to check me out on Twitch at the same name that you see here. You can also join my Discord by following the link down below in my bio or in the description of this video. If you want to be a part of stream, or if you just want to talk to me or other people like me and build a Magic community, then be sure to do that, where I try and stream at least twice a week and just try and have some fun and play with the members of my community, and it's generally a good time, so I'd love to see you there. But now, how do you win in a game of Commander? I have been pondering this question lately, and you may think that this is an essential part of building a deck, right? But most of the time, we as deck builders get so caught up in things like ramp and card draw removal, our own pet cards, and big flashy spells that we will oftentimes forget to include things that actually bring the game to an end. We have all probably gotten to a point in our EDH careers where our deck is doing the thing that we built it to do, where we make tokens, we reanimate all the big stuff in all the graveyards, we draw tons of cards, we counter every spell if you're the true type of evil, but then we come to the realization that there are 3 other people at the table, all with 40 health, that we need to get down to 0. So I thought I'd make a video where I just go over a few of the ways that you can end a game in all 5 colors of Magic. Now, just to clear something up, I didn't want to put dual or even tri-colored cards in this list, as it would be a pretty extensive list, and I'm sure that what I consider game ending, you might not. So if you can think of anything that I didn't include on this list, be sure to put it in the comments down below. Also, I just want to clear up the fact that I am not the type of player who shoots for combos, as I find them very unsatisfying to win with, and I find them unsatisfying to lose against. So I'm not going to include anything or suggest anything like Isochron Scepter, Dramatic Reversal, make infinite mana, and then draw my whole deck, and then cast my whole deck, and then, I'll find some way to win. So if you're a player who likes a good combo, then that's just you, but that's not really me. So I'm just going to suggest cards, and I'm going to suggest cards on how I like to win games. So we are going to follow the classic Wooburg structure of things, and we are going to start with white. So the best finishers by white, in my opinion, the first one I want to talk about is the classic Elesh Norn Grand Cenobite. So she's steep, she's 7 mana, so 5 white. We get a 4/7 with Vigilance that says other creatures you control get +2/+2, and creatures your opponents control get -2/-2. And the thing that's great about Elesh Norn is she is a powerhouse when she comes down. So yes, she's a lot of mana, but usually when Elesh Norn comes down, she is going to clear up those small tokens that other decks make all the time. She's going to clear up those 1/1s and 2/2s, which is even pretty big. There are also a lot of value creatures that I noticed that Elesh Norn hits. A lot of creatures in Magic that have either removal on them or good card draw or things that are just important to other people's decks. They're usually pretty low in the toughness rating, just because in Magic, obviously, when your creature is really good, they can't make the power and toughness super large. So Elesh Norn, well, a lot of the times, she's either going to clear out mass token boards, she's going to handle some value creatures, and then creatures that have over 2 toughness, she's going to bring down, so it makes them horrible blockers. So Elesh Norn, and then she's going to buff your whole board, so she makes your 1/1s into 3/3s, and you swing in with a massive board, and usually she's just a really, really nice, she's an anthem effect for you, and then she's, I don't know what you'd call it, she's a reduction effect for your opponents, and she's just a powerhouse. Next is the white Craterhoof Moonshaker Cavalry. So I recently just picked up one of these cards, and I've yet to cast it, but it's pretty insane. So it's 8 mana, it's 5 white. It's a 6/6 with flying. When it enters, creatures you control gain flying, which is insanely good on its own right. Then they get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control, so it's quite literally Crater Hoof instead of Trample. They gain flying, so they're gaining evasion. It might not be as good as Trample, especially with that buff, so they can still be blocked by 1/1 flyers, but Moonshaker Cavalry, it's just like another, just like Elesh Norn, it's a huge Anthem effect that also gives an insanely valuable keyword in flying, so this card's pretty sweet. Next, this is a little iffy, but I really like what it does because a lot of graveyard things seem to just pop off and be really powerful. So Brilliant Restoration, it's 3 white, 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 so for 7, you get a sorcery that says return all artifacts and enchantments from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now this is pretty niche, but I've noticed that in decks that want to either sacrifice their things, that you have enchantment creatures, you can make all your everything enchantments, and then you can do a mass sacrifice for value, and then bring everything back, and then sacrifice it again, and then you can kind of see where I'm going with that to get in that loop. White especially relies on things like artifacts and enchantments to either ramp, or they get things like an Avacyn's Memorial or a Chroma's Memorial. A lot of good value things, Anthem effects in their enchantments, and Brilliant Restoration can just bring everything back all at once and just give you one massive push when you need it. Next up is going to be probably the white spell that most of you use. It's definitely one that's in all of my white decks, I'm pretty sure, is a Chroma's Will. It's just like, there's no reason to not include this. It's really efficient to cast. It's 3 and a white at instant speed. So multicolored decks can easily cast this because of the 1 white. So it's choose 1 if you control your commander as you cast the spell. You can choose both. Creatures you control gain flying, vigilance, and double strike until end of turn, and creatures you control gain lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors. So it just gives all your creatures every keyword. It's not an Anthem effect, but it gives them double strike, protection from all colors so they can't be blocked. It gives them vigilance so that way you don't get hit on the crackback. It gives them double strike so you're gaining tons of life. The Chroma's Will is probably one of, if not the best game ender, in my opinion, in all of Magic. Like, this card, anytime I've casted this, it either wins you the game or it gains you so much life and handles your opponent's boards to where you're gonna win the game soon. Next up is True Conviction. This is a classic, pretty old card, might not be the best in terms of today's Magic, but I mean, just what it does. It's 3 white, white, white for an enchantment. Creatures you control have double strike and lifelink. So very similar to a Chroma's Will. It's going to give double strike to make sure that you can block effectively, you can attack really effectively, and even if your small things die, they have double strike and lifelink. So this card just puts you in such a high life total that blocking doesn't really matter to you anymore. When you have 200 life and someone attacks you for 30, you can just take it. Whereas someone who has 25 life, you attack with your giant board of double strikers, they either have to block and lose their whole board or they die. And last up is going to be kind of another iffy card, and you guys can make sure to tell me in the comments if you agree or not. Gold Knight Commander. So Gold Knight Commander is a 4 mana, he's 3 and a white for a 2/2. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, creatures you control get +1/+1 until the end of the turn. So if you have a way to make massive boards all at once, if you have like a Darien, King of Keldor, if you have Myrel, if you have anything that makes tokens, we're in white, so we have Ojertak, we have Mondrak, we have Adelaide, we have Anointed Procession, that's what I was thinking of. We do anything that makes tokens, we make 4 or 5 tokens, instantly our entire board of 1/1s is now getting +5/+5 until the end of the turn. Gold Knight Commander, I've seen come down in just absolutely end games by itself. When, it shows up and then you do your token thing that you're already doing in white, Gold Knight Commander is just gonna end the game for you. Next up, we are talking about blue. You might already know this, but my favorite color, and one that kind of breaks my heart, because blue is, in my opinion, the hardest color to win with. Just because, and you'll see here in a minute, but blue excels on helping other colors. It obviously counters spells, it helps you draw cards, it helps you play the game better, more efficiently, whatever you want to say. And the thing that blue struggles with is like how to end the game. It doesn't really have good Anthem effects, it doesn't have huge legendary creatures, it doesn't usually put out huge boards. Blue is the color of combo, and so it's really hard to win in blue besides these effects that I'm going to mention here in a second, but these are my top blue cards to win the game with. But usually mono blue is drawing its whole library, casting everything for free, making infinite mana, kind of the thing that I said that I don't like to do in the start of this video. So yeah, blue is really helpful when it's paired with another color, and playing it by itself is just difficult. But the first things I'm going to talk about are the obvious: Laboratory Maniac, Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, and Thassa's Oracle. Obviously, they, at least the Thoracle wins in a different way than the other two, but the Labman Jace win con is pretty common in mono blue decks because blue's just drawing so many cards, or like I said, you make infinite mana, you draw your whole deck. Laboratory Maniac and Jace, Wielder of Mysteries both do the same thing fundamentally. If you would draw a card and there's no cards in your library, you win the game instead. So those two are obviously one way that you can win in mono blue. But the other set of cards that I want to talk about, and again, the blue section is going to be kind of shorter than the other ones, just because these are pretty much the only ways that I've noticed in my games that I win in with blue, and it's going to be Cyclonic Rift, Cryptic Command, and Spectral Deluge. And these cards, I'm mentioning them all together because Cyclonic Rift, pretty classic. You return everything your opponents control to their hand, and it allows you to just swing in and have your big turn. Same with Spectral Deluge, especially if you're in mono blue. You return all creatures your opponents control with toughness X or less, where X is the number of islands you control. So obviously if you're in mono blue and you have, I don't know if you would ever have 10 islands, but if you have something like 6 islands, 7 islands, you can return most things and get that same swing as Cyclonic Rift, and this spell can be foretold and casted for 3 mana, where Cyclonic Rift is 7. So I really like Spectral Deluge. And Cryptic Command is nice because it's super modal, which is really nice when you're playing a game of Magic. Obviously, you can counter a spell, you can return a permanent to its owner's hand, you can tap all creatures your opponents control, or you can draw a card. So Cryptic Command just kind of, it hits all the niches that you're really wanting to hit. Obviously, it's got control. You can return a permanent if you need to in a pinch. You can draw a card if you need to in a pinch. But mainly, it's the tap all creatures your opponents control is the biggest thing with Cryptic Command that's going to help you win a game. And the last thing I want to talk about in mono blue is my favorite way that I found to end games recently is Candlekeep Inspiration. It's a 5 mana sorcery, so it's a little steep and it's slow, but it is probably the best mono blue game ender. Until the end of your turn, creatures you control have a base power and toughness XX. So it's not giving plus XX, it's giving a base power. So if you have a 10/10, it is going to now become whatever X is. And X is equal to the number of instants and sorceries you own in exile and in your graveyard. So there's also a little caveat here. It says instant, sorcery, and or cards with adventure. So, but adventure, you're probably not playing anything with adventure. But basically, what I love about Candlekeep Inspiration is pretty sure it counts itself. So that's at least 1. And then it's going to count things in exile. So if your graveyard got exiled, or if you flash something back, or if you delve something and you exile from your graveyard, Candlekeep Inspiration is going to count those cards too. So I've constantly had Candlekeep Inspiration be, all my creatures are 10s, 11s, 12s. And when you have 10 1/1s tokens that you've been making all game, and then they instantly become 12/12s, it's game over. Candlekeep Inspiration is incredible in my opinion, and probably one of the best, if not my favorite game ender, because it kind of comes out of nowhere. When people are like, oh, you just have your board of 1/1s, what are you gonna do? Okay, I'll just cast Candlekeep Inspiration. They instantly become 10/10s, and now you have just a huge board of huge creatures. So Candlekeep Inspiration, if you're not playing it for you spell slingers, instant and sorcery heavy decks, definitely check it out. Next up is going to be black. How does black win the game? And black, in my opinion, is probably got one of the easiest ways to end games, just because you probably know all your mono black playing friends, or just people who play like Aristocrats, Rakdos or Orzhov, they're constantly doing the thing where it's like, oh, I'll sacrifice my whole board, then I'll reanimate my whole graveyard, then I'll sacrifice my whole thing, and then I'll bring them all back, and then I'm going to cast Grey Merchant, then I'll sacrifice, then I'll bring it back. Okay, now you're all dead. And then after all that, then I'll cast Exsanguinate, where X is 10. And, it's like, oh, I'll sack everything to Phyrexian Altar and make a bunch of mana, bring everything back. You know the drill. So I'm just going to start off with the black section being Living Death. Living Death is awesome. It's a card that I see constantly in my play group. So it's 5 mana for a sorcery, but each player exiles all creatures in it. So it's worded weird, but basically I'm just going to give the layman's terms. So you have your board, you have your graveyard. You exile all the creatures from your graveyard, they're gone. Then everybody sacrifices their board. So that can be important for quite a few things. It doesn't just say destroy all creatures. So, I have an Avacyn and my board is indestructible. Living Death, you sacrifice it. Get it out of here. Doesn't matter. So then you sacrifice your whole board. Then the spells or the creatures that were in exile from your graveyard then come back onto your battlefield. And this will get enter the battlefield triggers. You get, you can sacrifice things, and a lot of the times the mono black player is gonna do like I just said. They're gonna have their Ashnod's Altar out. They're gonna have their Phyrexian Altar, their Altar of Dementia, and they're gonna say, I'll sacrifice my entire board, and then I'll make 20 mana, and then I'll resolve my Living Death, and then I'll lose nothing, and I bring my entire graveyard back. And comboed with things like Blood Artist, Zulaport Cutthroat, Pitiless Plunder. You can see where I'm going with this for mono black players, and I'm sure that most of you either lose to this card or this strategy a lot, so I probably don't have to explain it to you. And the next card that's going to combo with the Living Death is kind of like the same scenario is Rise of the Dark Realms. This is a pretty classic thing that's stapled on the other cards, Reanimate, or I know that there's a Liliana that does it. I can't think of it on the top of my head, but put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. This is another classic way that Black wins, is reanimating their big stuff or reanimating your things, so they can combo different effects together with different creatures that are outside of their colors. So, an Orzhov deck, a white-black deck, can reanimate a red creature like Terror of the Peaks and then do their thing and then win the game, or something like that. A big blue creature. So you get where I'm going. And the next card, I've already mentioned it, is Grey Merchant of Asphodel. This card, Gary, affectionately known as, is a game ender just by himself. When he enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, and you gain X life, where X is your devotion to black. Or sorry, you don't gain X life. You gain the life that is lost this way. So let's say that your devotion is 5. Your opponents each lose 5 life, but you don't gain 5 life. You gain 15. So Gary, especially on a loop where you play him, sack him, reanimate, sack, game's just over. And another card that I personally like that might not be as powerful as Gary is Kakusho. So if you're playing, like I include Kakusho in my Muldrotha deck, which is 3 colors, so Gary might not do as well in a 3-color deck, but Kakusho will do a mass drain for a set amount. So Kakusho, Gary, kind of in the same boat. And the next is going to be those Aristocrat style cards that I've already mentioned. Blood Artist, Zulaport Cutthroat. I know that there's another one. It'll probably be on screen somewhere up here, but those types of effects, whenever another creature dies, target opponent loses 1 life, or everybody loses 1 life. So it's just, you sack 10 creatures, everybody loses 10 life. You bring them back, you sack them all again, everybody loses 10 more. And then, that's 20 life. That's half of the life. If nobody has lost any life, you've now effectively dealt 20, 20, and 20. So you've dealt 60 damage with just your Blood Artist and a Sacrifice Outlet. Next up is not exactly like a game winning drive, but it kind of sets up the win. The same for like Cyclonic Rift or Spectral Deluge is cards like Grave Pact or Dictate of Erebos. So Grave Pact specifically, I'm just going to read, but Dictate of Erebos just does the same thing. Whenever a creature you control dies, each other player sacrifices a creature. So mainly black decks will make small tokens. They'll make 5 tokens, and then they sacrifice all 5, and they drain everyone, and then everyone else sacrifices 5, or they'll, like I said, you can kind of see where this combos with in black. where I have my 5 creatures. I sacrifice my 5 creatures. Now you sacrifice 5 creatures. Then I'm going to drain you for 5. Then I'm going to reanimate my graveyard. And then I'm going to get their ETBs. Then I will sacrifice them again. Then you lose 5. And then you sack 5 more. And it goes around and around and around. So make sure to leave in the comments below if you play against the super annoying black players. But no, seriously, that's why I'm saying that black is probably one of the most solid ways to win a game of Magic, because it is so consistent that way. And lastly, I'm just going to talk about Torment of Hailfire. Like Torment, Exsanguinate, kind of really similar, do similar things. Torment is X black black, repeat the process X times. Each opponent loses 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card. So you got your Ashnod's Altar, sack your whole board, bring it back, sack your whole board. Okay, now I've got 30 mana. X is equal to 28. Everybody's got to either discard, 28 cards, sacrifice 28 permanents, and if you can't, you just lose 3 life 28 times, and then you die. So black is an insanely powerful color, and in my opinion, the strongest game-ending color that isn't going to combat. So like white, you need to go to combat. Blue, draw your whole deck kind of thing. Red, you're like dealing mass damage, but black is kind of like, I'm going to sit, I'm going to do my own thing. I can do all of this with just a bunch of 1/1s. I don't need to make huge creatures. I can just make a lot of really small creatures, and then I'm going to do the drain and gain, make my mana, reanimate everything, drain and gain again. Now I've got even more mana, then I'll cast an Exsanguinate where X is 50, everybody's dead, So black, super, super good. You already know. Next up is going to be red. Red is challenging because I feel like red has a really good top end, but getting red to that point is so difficult. Red starts out like either really fast and then it gets really slow, or it starts out really slow and then kind of, by the time that other colors have their ramp, they have their treasures, they have their artifacts, red's just kind of catching up. So red is so difficult when it's by itself, but for the sake of this video, obviously there's Perforos, God of the Forge, Impact Tremors, Warstorm, Surge, things like that. When creatures enter or when things enter, everybody takes damage. Same kind of deal with black, and this style in red is pretty well known. Along with, I do want to mention Goblin Bombardment. Definitely nowhere near as strong, but you sacrifice a creature and Goblin Bombardment deals 1 damage to any target, so you can remove small creatures, or like let's say that you make 50 tokens, you sacrifice 50 tokens, you can deal 50 damage to someone. So next up is going to be Crackle with Power. This card is probably one of the most bombshell cards in red. Crackle with Power deals 5 times X damage to each of up to X targets, so that can be problem creatures, or that can be your 3 opponents. So Crackle's just going to do times 5 if you have ways to make a lot of mana, and obviously like the Exsanguinate or the Torment, you put that mana into X and you just deal 5 times 10 damage to 3 to, it's confusing sometimes to like remember how Crackle with Power works, but if X is 10, you deal 10 times 5 damage to 10 targets, but then you need to have, X needs to be 10, so it's X, 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 red, red, so you would need to have 32 mana, but this card just can end a game on the spot. Next up is Insurrection. Probably one of the most classic ways to end a game in red is with Insurrection, or Mob Rule is the other card that does, it's like Insurrection Light, but Insurrection is 8 mana, 5 red, 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 and untap all creatures and gain control of them until the end of the turn. They gain haste. You take this is the Cyclonic Rift of red. You take everyone's creatures, give them all haste, and untap them. You're killing at least 2 people if you can cast Insurrection with a good board out. Next is Terror of the Peaks. This is really similar to Perforos, but whenever another creature enters, you're going to deal, Terror of the Peaks deals the damage, so if that is ever important, Terror of the Peaks is going to deal damage equal to that creature's power to any target. So usually it's, Terror, then you sneak attack your whole hand out, and then just bolt the table with your big creatures. And then we have Hellkite Tyrant. So I included this here because it's kind of weird, but Hellkite Tyrant, when it deals combat damage to a player, gain control of all artifacts that player controls. So this can steal treasures, it can steal clues, it can steal, whatever. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 20 or more artifacts, you win the game. I don't like to include things that just say on them, you win the game, like a Felidar Guardian, or I think it's Felidar Guardian, whatever the one is where you know, if you have 40 or more life, you win the game. It's just really boring to just instantly win. But with Hellkite Tyrant, I feel like you need to do a lot more work. Your opponents need to be having a lot of artifacts for you to steal, or you need to be generating a lot of artifacts yourself. So it's different than just spells that just say, oh, if you have 30 life, you win. And it's like, oh, okay, I guess, oh, whoops, I just won. You know, Hellkite is a lot more setup, so I think it's warranted. And lastly is going to be Chandra's Ignition. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and each opponent. So this can be used as a very effective board wipe, or let's say your commander has 21 power for some reason. Chandra's Ignition does count as commander damage. So if you can deal 21 damage with your commander to everyone, you will just commander damage them out of the game. But if you just have a big creature, like let's say you have a creature with 10 power, you effectively board wipe, and you're going to deal 10 damage to each of your opponents. Is very powerful. And lastly is green. This green is probably most known for Anthem effects that white has been getting recently, but things in green that obviously is like, you know that these end the game. Craterhoof Behemoth, I've talked about it at the beginning of this video. It's got haste. When it enters, it's going to give trample. When Craterhoof Behemoth enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain trample and get XX until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. Green is so good at making a ton of creatures, ton of small creatures. You cast Craterhoof. Like, if you guys have been playing Commander at all for any amount of time, Craterhoof is like one of the staple game ender cards for all of Magic, but green obviously specifically because it is green. Next is Avenger of Zendikar. Now, Avenger might not come down and instantly win, but Avenger, especially in green decks, especially in mono green decks where you're just ramping a lot, Avenger comes down, makes you a ton of blockers to keep you alive until your next turn, and then it's got that sweet landfall. Whenever land enters, you may put a 1/1 counter on each plant you control. So usually it's Avenger, make 10 0/1s, then I'm gonna do my ramp, and now all my 0/1s are now 5/6s. And you can either give them haste in a variety of ways. Concordant Crossroads, one of my favorite ways, and Crashing Drawbridge in mono green, but then you pair it in other colors, and Avenger just totally balls out, and Avenger just sweeps the table. Next is Genesis Wave. I haven't really had a lot of experience losing to this, but Genesis Wave, it's not something that comes down and you instantly win, but it's something that puts you in a position to win. So it's X green, reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put any number of permanent cards with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Then all cards revealed this way that were not put onto the battlefield, you put in your graveyard. So usually in green, you're not really going to reveal a lot of instants and sorceries that matter too much, but the great thing about this is that it will do lands. And it will hit all of your landfall triggers. And, you know, let's say that you make X equal to 10, like let's say your highest converted mana card is 10. If you hit your highest card, you're gonna play it. And then everything else under that, which is lower than your highest card, you basically flip 10, put 10 out. I'm sure that in your green way, you're gonna find a way to either win right there, or you're gonna win on your next turn. So Genesis Wave is money. So I like Pathbreaker Ibex because it's on a creature. Whenever Pathbreaker Ibex attacks, creatures you control gain trample and get XX until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So it's effectively slower Craterhoof, because Craterhoof is on Enter the Battlefield and Craterhoof has haste. But I wanted to talk about Pathbreaker Ibex because I just think it's kind of cool. Endrace Forerunners, which is Craterhoof Light. It's got Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. When Endrace Forerunners enters the battlefield, each other creature you control gets +2/+2, gains Vigilance, Trample, until end of turn. So again, just a lot of keywords. It only gives +2/+2, but giving 2 keywords is also really nice. Triumph of the Hordes gives +1/+1 until end of turn, and then your creatures gain Trample and Infect. So this is basically, Triumph of the Hordes is the way to end the game without dealing 40 damage to everyone. You only need to deal 10 with that Infect. And Finale of Devastation is really nice because you search your library and or graveyard, now that's very important, for a creature card with mana value X or less, and put it onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle it obviously. If X is 10 or more, creatures you control get +X/+X and gain haste until end of turn. So Finale of Devastation goes incredibly hard. Like, you're in green, you're going to have a lot of mana anyway, so X, it's going to be really easy to get to 10. And if, let's say it's just 10, you search your library for your highest converted mana creature, put it out, all your creatures get +10/+10 and haste. It doesn't give trample, but I mean your 1/1 Saprotlings now become 11/11s. Finale of Devastation is incredibly good, and if you're in mono green, or I mean really any color that's just got a lot of mana, Finale of Devastation might be the card for you. I think that is going to do it for this video, and if you like what I'm trying to do here, make sure to like and subscribe and push all the buttons if you would. And again, these are just a few of the ways that I like to end the game in all of the mono colors. Be sure to drop a comment if you felt like there was anything that I missed, or if you want to tell me your favorite way to end a game of Commander. And as always, I am your host and your friendly blue mage, Azarain. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.